I discovered my city's beloved hero was secretly a monster. To expose him, I had to become a ghost. I'm a civil engineer. It's not a glamorous job, but it's an honest. I build the bones of a city, the bridges, the water mains, the foundations, that everyone relies on but no one ever sees. For a decade, my world was concrete and steel, a predictable landscape of blueprints and calculations. I was proud of my work, proud to be building a future for the city I loved. My city was in the middle of a renaissance, a miraculous revival led by one man, Marcus Thorne. He was a real estate tycoon turned philanthropist, a hometown hero who had returned after making his fortune and was now single-handedly revitalizing our dying downtown. He was our savior. He bought up derelict warehouses and crumbling theaters, transforming them into beautiful, thriving spaces. He funded parks, scholarships, and a new wing for the city hospital. He was universally adored, a man whose generosity seemed to have no limit. My firm was lucky enough to be the lead engineering consultant on all of his major projects. I was the one on the ground, overseeing the structural integrity of his vision. I admired him. The first whisper of a problem came from deep beneath the city, in the labyrinth of old sewer tunnels under the historic district. We were retrofitting the foundation for Thorne's biggest project yet, the Pinnacle, a dazzling skyscraper that was set to become the new centerpiece of our skyline. It was standard procedure to survey the existing infrastructure. That's when my team found it. A section of a primary water main that wasn't on any of the city's official schematic was an old pipe, cast iron from the early 20th century, but it had been recently and expertly reinforced with modern polymers. It was a ghost pipe, and it was still active, diverting a significant amount of fresh water to an unknown destination. It was a puzzle, but with the pressure of the Pinnacle's deadline, my supervisor told me to just document it and work around. It's probably just some forgotten industrial line, he said. Don't waste time on it. But I couldn't let it go. An undocumented water main is a serious public safety risk. Forgetting it wasn't just lazy, it was dangerous. I started my own quiet investigation after hours. I pulled the original century-old city utility maps from the municipal archives. There it was, a faint line marked industrial use only, leading from the river to the old textile mill district, an area that had been abandoned for 50 years. But according to my team's survey, the pipe wasn't pulling from the river. It was tapping directly into the city's purified water supply after it left the treatment plant. Someone was stealing millions of gallons of treated city water. I followed the line on the old map. It ran directly beneath 3 of Marcus Thorne's most celebrated revitalization projects. This couldn't be a coincidence. I needed to see where it went. I confided in my oldest friend, a journalist named Ben who had a healthy distrust for men like Thorne. Together, we acquired a small remote-controlled pipe drone, the kind used for sewer inspections. One night, we lowered the drone into a maintenance access point. What we found was baffling. The ghost pipe didn't lead to a factory or a secret reservoir. It branched off into a complex, modern network of smaller pipes, each one leading directly into the basements of Thorne's new luxury condos, his 5-star hotel, and his corporate office tower. He wasn't just stealing water, he was creating his own private off-the-books utility system for his flagship properties. He was avoiding hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in utility fees, passing the cost of the unaccounted-for water loss onto every other citizen in the city through higher rates. It was a brilliant, audacious, and deeply illegal scam, but it was still just a suspicion. We had footage of pipes, but we couldn't definitively prove Thorne was behind it. We needed more. We needed a smoking gun. Ben started digging into Thorne's corporate structure. It was a maze of shell companies and offshore holdings designed to be impenetrable. But Ben was a bloodhound. He found a small anomaly, a recurring high-value payment from one of Thorne's LLCs to a company called Subterranean Solutions, Inc. It was a ghost company. No website, no office, just a P.O. box in Delaware. The payments were labeled Geotechnical Consult. It was a dead end until Ben cross-referenced the company's incorporation paper. The name of the sole director was a man named Leo Petrocelli. A quick search revealed that Petrocelli was a disgraced civil engineer who had lost his license 10 years earlier for falsifying municipal safety reports. He had disappeared from the professional world, but we had just found him. He was Thorne's ghost engineer, the man who had built and maintained his secret water network. Finding Petrocelli became our obsession. We knew he was the weak link, the one person who could connect Thorne directly to the crime. We finally tracked him down to a small, unassuming house in a working-class neighborhood across the state. The man who answered the door was a shadow of the confident engineer in his old photos. He was nerve-noid and looked like a man who was used to looking over his shoulder. At first, he denied everything, but when Ben showed him the bank statements, the color drained from his face. I didn't threaten him. I appealed to the one thing I hoped he had left, his professional pride. I told him about the risk, about the pressure an unmapped system put on the city's aging infrastructure. I told him he was an engineer, and he had a duty to public safety. He broke. He confessed everything. He explained that Thorne had found him when he was at his lowest, offering him a fortune to design and build the illegal network. Petrocelli gave us everything, the secret blueprints, the maintenance logs, and a detailed signed confession of his and Thorne's entire scheme. We finally had our smoking gun. We had enough evidence to go to the FBI, but we knew that a federal investigation into a man as powerful as Marcus Thorne could take years. He would use his army of lawyers to bury us in legal motions, and by the time the case ever went to trial, the evidence could be muddied, and the public's outrage would have faded. Thorne's power wasn't just in his money, It was in his public image. He was a saint. To defeat him, we couldn't just prove he was a criminal. We had to show the entire city, in one undeniable moment, that their hero was a fraud. And I knew exactly how to. Thorne's crowning achievement, the pinnacle, was set to have its grand opening in 1 month. The finale of the ceremony was to be the Fountain of Progress, a massive, state-of-the-art water feature in the building's main plaza. It was an engineering marvel, designed to shoot synchronized jets of water 100 feet into the air, all set to music. It was meant to symbolize the city's rebirth. It was the perfect stage for his downfall. As the lead engineer on the project, I had access to the fountain's central controls. It was an incredibly complex piece of machinery, a symphony of pumps, valves, and processors. Over the next few weeks, I spent my nights in the Pinnacle's cavernous basement, supposedly running final diagnostic tests. But what I was really doing was staging my own silent coup. I wrote a piece of malicious code, a digital Trojan horse, and buried it deep within the fountain's primary operating system. The code was designed to do 2 things. First, on my command, it would override the fountain's connection to the city's legitimate water supply. Second, it would open a series of hidden high-pressure valves connected directly to Thorne's secret stolen water network. The fountain would still work perfectly, but it would be running on stolen water. But that wasn't the final step. I needed a way to show everyone the truth. I got my hands on a harmless, highly concentrated, industrial-grade fluorescent dye, the kind used to trace leaks in large-scale plumbing. It was invisible in water, but glowed a brilliant, almost radioactive green under UV light. The night before the ceremony, I injected the dye into Thorne's ghost pipe at a maintenance junction, miles away. The night of the grand opening was the biggest social event in the city's history. A massive crowd had gathered in the Pinnacle's plaza, their faces filled with hope and civic pride. Marcus Thorne stood at a podium on a grand stage, the very picture of a benevolent leader. He was flanked by the governor, the mayor, and every other important person who had been charmed by his vision. I was in the crowd, a small, anonymous figure holding a remote detonator in my... Ben was positioned with a professional camera crew on a nearby rooftop, ready to broadcast the event to a live stream he had set up under the guise of an independent news blog. Thorne began his speech, his voice booming across the plaza. He spoke of his love for the city, of his belief in its future, and of the new era of prosperity that was dawning. "This pinnacle is not just a building," he declared, his voice thick with fake emotion. "It is a symbol of our shared renewal. And this fountain, the Fountain of Progress, is a testament to the clean, pure, and transparent spirit of our city." With a grand flourish, he raised his hand. "Let the water flow," he commanded. The crowd roared as the orchestra began to play a triumphant score. I pressed the button. The pumps in the basement whirred to life, and a torrent of water erupted from the fountain, soaring into the night sky. It was a beautiful sight. The crowd gasped in awe. Thorne stood there, basking in the adoration, a king surveying his kingdom. He looked invincible. For 2 full minutes, he let the spectacle play out. Then, as the music reached its crescendo, he gave us a bank of powerful theatrical lights at the base of the fountain switched on. But they weren't white lights. They were high-intensity UV lights, the kind I had secretly swapped out earlier that day. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The massive jets of water, which had been crystal clear a second before, suddenly began to glow with a sickly, ethereal green light. The entire Fountain of Progress was spewing a geyser of radioactive-looking water into the air, staining the pristine white marble of the plaza. The crowd's applause died in their throats, replaced by a collective, confused gasp. The triumphant music from the orchestra faltered, then stopped. A shocked silence fell over the entire plaza. People were pointing, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. On the stage, Marcus Thorne's confident smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of utter disbelief. He stared at the glowing green water, then looked frantically at the technicians in the control booth. But they were just as baffled as he was. Ben's cameras were rolling, capturing the surreal scene and broadcasting it live. This was my moment. I had given a copy of Petrocelli's confession and the drone footage to Sarah, a trusted investigative reporter at the city's biggest news station. We had timed it perfect. As the chaos erupted in the plaza, a push notification went out to every phone in the city. The headline read, "Marcus Thorne's empire built on a billion-gallon lie." The article, complete with our irrefutable evidence, went viral in seconds. You could see the blue light of phone screens illuminating the faces in the crowd as they read the story, their expressions shifting from confusion to pure, unadulterated rage. They looked up from their phones, no longer at a hero, but at a thief. They had been paying for his luxury, for his lie, with every water bill. The sound started as a low murmur, then grew into a tidal wave of people started shouting, pointing at the stage. "Thief! Liar! You poisoned our city!" The governor and the mayor, realizing they were standing next to a political bomb, began backing away from Thorne, their faces pale with shock and embarrassment. Thorne stood there, completely exposed, his empire of lies crumbling around him in a shower of glowing green water. He had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. He was trapped on the stage of his greatest triumph, which had just become the scene of his public execution. The ensuing investigation was swift, and with the public evidence of the fountain, Petrocelli's confession, and the mountain of financial documents Ben had uncovered, Thorne's legal team had nothing to fight with. The FBI, armed with federal warrants, raided his offices the next morning, seizing servers and records that confirmed everything. The scale of the fraud was even larger than we had imagined. He hadn't just stolen, he had used his shell companies to rig construction bids, bribe city inspectors, and launder money through his so-called philanthropic donations. His entire revitalization of the city had been a masterfully orchestrated illusion, a way to acquire public land and resources for pennies on the dollar while building his own personal fiefdom. The city was thrown into chaos. The mayor was forced to resign for his role in enabling Thorne's corruption. 3 city council members were indicted on bribery charges. The public trust was shattered. It was a painful, ugly process, but it was also a cleansing fire. For the first time in a generation, the city was forced to look at the rot that had been festering just beneath its beautiful surface. The pinnacle, his monument to greed, stood half empty, a symbol of his hubris. The Fountain of Progress was shut down, its stained marble a permanent reminder of the night the city's hero was exposed as its greatest. As for I became a ghost. I had quit my job the day after the gala, leaving a simple letter of resignation on my supervisor's desk. I knew that if I stayed, I would be hounded by the media, a reluctant hero in a story I never wanted to be a part of. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to see justice done, to protect the city I love. I took a new job with a smaller firm in a different state, seeking the anonymity I had lost. The trial lasted 6 months. I followed it from a distance, a ghost watching the ripples of my actions spread. Marcus Thorne, the man who had once been the most powerful person in the city, looked small and defeated in the court. His expensive suits couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. He was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The judge, in her sentencing, called his actions a profound and calculated betrayal of public trust. He was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. On the day of his sentencing, I received an unexpected package. It was from Ben. Inside was a small, heavy object wrapped in cloth. It was a piece of the stained marble from the Fountain of Progress, mounted on a simple wooden plaque. Attached was a small engraved plate. Sometimes, the bones have to be broken before they can be set right. To the ghost who saved our city. It was the only trophy I ever needed. It reminded me that my job wasn't just about building things. It was about ensuring they were built on a foundation of truth. I had started my career wanting to build structures. I had ended up having to tear one down. The irony was not lost on me. I had to become a saboteur to be a true engineer. Years passed. The city began to heal. A new, younger generation of leaders took over, committed to transparency and reform. The companies and properties seized from Thorne were placed into a new, publicly managed trust, with the profits now being used to fund actual community projects. The city wasn't as shiny as it was under Thorne's reign, but it was more real. It had scars now, but it also had a soul. I never went back. My life was somewhere else now, a quiet life of honest work and simple pleasures. But I still read the news from my old home, watching from afar as it slowly, painfully, rebuilt its. One day I saw an article that caught my eye. A group of local artists had turned the now-defunct Fountain of Progress into a public art installation. They had embraced the story, covering the stained marble with a mosaic of faces, the faces of the everyday citizens of the city. In the center, where the highest jet of water once stood, they had erected a simple, unadorned steel sculpture. It was an abstract design, a series of flowing, interconnected lines. But I recognized it immediately. It was a perfect, three-dimensional representation of the constellation Lyra. I had never told anyone, not even Ben, about my parents' connection to that constellation. It was a secret I had kept for myself. And yet, there it was, a symbol of an artist's voice, a song that never dies, standing in the heart of the city I had saved. It was a beautiful, impossible coincidence. I finally understood. My story, my parents' story, had become a part of the city's story, woven into its very fabric in a way I had never intended. The city had found its own way to build a memorial, not just to the lie that had been exposed, but to the truth that had set it free. I realized then that I wasn't a ghost anymore. A ghost is unseen, unheard, a whisper from the past. But my actions, my choices, had an echo that was still reverberating. My work had been invisible, but its impact was undeniable. I looked at the picture of the sculpture in the newspaper, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of profound and lasting peace. The man who sold his city was in prison. The city itself was healing, scarred but on, and my parents' legacy wasn't just a memory in my mind or a pattern in the stars. It was a silent, steel song, standing tall in the center of a city that had learned the hard way that the most beautiful things aren't the ones that look perfect, but the ones that are built to last, on a foundation of unshakable truth. My work was finally done. The bones of the city were strong again.